For this episode of Visions of Education, we're joined by Dr. Mukherjee, a sociologist who works with Arpan, an NGO that looks at child sexual abuse in India. Dr. Mukherjee, if we could begin with the prevention and intervention skills that this organization focuses on, and when it comes to educating, what it sees its purpose to be around those skills.
So what we do is we run a program called Personal Safety Education Program in school. And the focus of the program is to build socio-emotional skills in children so that children are being able to express themselves, they're being able to manage themselves, they're becoming self-aware and self-reflective. At the same time, they're also socially aware and being able to address and identify unsafe situations. We are also working towards so that they have healthy relationship skills, so that they are when they're in relationship, they are using respect and empathy as key. Being able to communicate about any unsafe situation that they are expressing. So one key part of the program is to work simultaneously with teachers and parents and the entire school system, so that you're kind of providing the child with the messages, and you're trying that the caregivers in the child's environment are also reinforcing these messages, and you're strengthening the child support system. So the program kind of addresses all the levels of the adult as well as the children, and kind of equip children to identify unsafe situations, to kind of refuse those situations assertively, as well as kind of seek help in those kind of situations. So again, building on their decision making skills and problem solving skills as key. The purpose that you're asking me, I think the purpose comes from the space to understand that education is beyond academics, and we need to reconstruct education beyond academics, because a child who is facing an unsafe situation or sexual abuse experience at home, as a teacher in the classroom, I can't expect that the child is under normal circumstances and will be able to absorb the maths lessons or the geography lessons that I'm trying to deliver. So a classroom needs to be a space for a child which is a life affirming space, where the child is being able to connect, the child is being able to express and ask questions, and the child is also being able to seek help if there is an unsafe situation. Because then we believe that learning and education that we're talking about will not only be information or skills, it will go beyond and talk about a holistic kind of an education, which is kind of connecting the child's body, physical, mind, vital, everything together.
So this socio-emotional space that you're trying to create, where one is able to call out, um, you know, uh, discrimination and acts of abuse and so on. Can you go into a little bit more detail about what exactly that feels like? Those experiences that you're trying to create, and those spaces and environments you're trying to create. How should one feel by participating in them?
So I think the kind of experiences that we're creating is trying to create a safe space for the child. I think primarily that's the objective, that if we are being able to create a safe space for the child, if we are being able to tell the child that all children, however they are special and awesome. So building on their self-esteem and their self-awareness, for them to understand about their body and their emotions and articulate their emotions, and understand that emotions and feelings are a tool for them to understand whether they're in a safe or an unsafe situation. So that will help them in decision making, and then to talk about them that how they can strengthen their interpersonal skills in order to seek help, how they can build in and be in positive relationship, and what are those categories or factors that will help them understand that whether they are in a safe relationship or an unsafe relationship. So trying to inculcate respect and empathy and personal boundaries in children. What children expect from these sessions is definitely, in a country like India, there is hardly discussion and there is silence around talking about sexuality in general and sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So what does this program tries to do? One is to kind of demystify that first, to demystify the stigma and shame that's there around talking about sexuality, talking about private body parts. I think that's the first step that this program does. The second that it does is to talk to children that it's okay to talk about your emotions and feelings. It's your space to express if you are uncomfortable. Again, coming back to the culture that we live in, generally, I think so-called negative emotions of anger or confusion or guilt or shame is something that as a culture we don't really kind of give enough space to talk about it. We want to hush it up. So this spaces give that child that space to say that it's okay for you to talk about it. It's okay for you also to refuse something that you don't like, because again, there is a huge understanding that we need to go and abide by and obey whatever our adults or parents say us to do. However, to give them that understanding that it's okay to express yourself if you're uncomfortable, it's okay to seek help. I think that's a very key message. What we see after this program definitely is we see that children are becoming more confident to talk about issues of sexual abuse. We see children coming and disclosing, because the way we run the program is we don't only do a classroom based intervention, we follow the classroom based intervention with individual sessions where the facilitator talk to each child one-on-one to create that safe space with two objectives in mind. One is to reinforce what has been done in classroom, to understand how the child has received that information. However, more towards also to create a space where if the child has been facing any unsafe experience in the past or currently going through anything, the child has that space to kind of express that. I think express and disclose that. Post that, what we do that once children have had a disclosure, we have counselors, then we connect these children with counselors, and then the counseling process continues till the time the children are being able to kind of come to terms with what has happened to them and they've bounced back from the experience. Because I think what we strongly believe that while child sexual abuse can leave impact in children, this scars need not be permanent, and it shouldn't be permanent, and it isn't permanent as long as we are being able to provide that help to the child and letting the child know that it's not their fault. So another key intervention and the message that goes to the child, that irrespective of the sexual abuse that has happened, irrespective of if the child has faced the sexual abuse experience in their life, it's not the child's fault. It's the fault of the person who have done it, but it's not the child's fault because the child didn't violate anybody. With older children, we also talk about their own personal boundaries and consequences of breaking others' personal boundaries. And we talk about how it's very critical for them to remember empathy and inculcate in them respect, because that's what kind of come in the long way of walking towards so that they are being respectful to others and they are not kind of perpetuating the kind of any kind of violations of anyone else's body.
In a broader Indian context, in schools, in society at large, what structural changes need to take place in order for these issues to be spoken about that bit more than they are?
I think if I look at, I think Arpan has been in existence for the last more than 12 years now.
Yeah.
And if I look at changes that we see as an organization, I think earlier when you kind of approach a school with a program, you'd see very heightened resistance. One for a space that doesn't happen in my school. It doesn't happen to our children. It exists, but it exists somewhere outside. So there was completely othering of the issue, saying that it doesn't happen in my society, in my family, in my school. Yeah. Today, if I kind of look at after this 12 years of existence, I think there is a change there. And maybe because of media reported, people talking about sexual abuse more openly, schools are really geared up to say, okay, yeah, it's a reality, it does happen, and we are open to have a program. Where schools, I think, feel a challenge, and sometimes they vocalize the challenges that we are okay with it, but parents wouldn't take it well. Mm-hmm. So that's another fear that some schools operate from. However, when you talk to parents, I think parents also come from an opinion that it's best if schools does it because we don't know how to talk about this. So I think there is a general hesitation in people to talk about this issue, and people do welcome third parties like us to come in and do it because it kind of helps them then not to have this conversation themselves. However, I think I think structural changes that needs to happen definitely in understanding of the entire normative structure in which we kind of exist, and the entire silence there is around sexuality. The kind of, I think, working towards, I think, deconstructing the myths around sexual abuse. I think one prominent myth around that I spoke to you about definitely is the othering of it, which is kind of changing. There are some other myths around that it only happens with girls, it doesn't happen with boys. While Girls from India, where TV shows that both boys and girls are equally vulnerable to sexual abuse. There are other myths around that children invited it, they liked it. Or the myth around that it's part of growing up, it happens. And the other part of it, I think, which is also very significantly related, because urban looks intervention as both prevention and healing together, is the entire denial that child sexual abuse can lead to impact. It can lead to impact at a child's behavioral, educational outcomes, social outcomes, and can impact if the child doesn't receive the help immediately. So I think there also there is a denial, and I think for parents to understand the need for the child to go through counseling, to continue and sustain counseling, I think that's another piece of work. And this is also in the larger framework where mental health is anyway a taboo.
How you go about persuading governments and other stakeholders in the society to implement these changes? What kind of partnerships are you establishing with other networks in the society?
Okay, so I think the kind of partnerships that we're currently looking at is definitely both governmental partnerships, partnerships with large schools and school chains, and partnership with NGOs. I think those are three critical partnerships that we're looking at. In terms of government partnership, I think that we have seen a change in the government's willingness to take up child protection as an issue, as a mandate. Like to receive for the last 2 years, we have been working with the NCRT, the National Curriculum Board, and the MHRD departments to include person safety as part of the Ayushman Bharat curriculum as a life skill program. And we have been able to do that as a part of the larger think tank. I think that in itself shows that there is a willingness to understand, and somewhere, and that's why I see that that shift that we see today is that there has been an understanding that, okay, this issue is real and we need to address it and talk about it. However, I think with government, I think definitely, I think perseverance is the key. A lot of things is also dependent in terms of who are you talking to, who are you kind of negotiating with, and there is definitely a lot of processes involved in terms of change happening within the government system, which kind of makes it to start afresh quite a few times. I think those are part of any kind of advocacy efforts, I think, and I think those are things that will continue to happen for some time. But if you talk about the larger environment of kind of understanding that this is a priority, or this is an issue that needs to be kind of taken up, I think we have started on it. We have started on that process where we kind of understand it. And I think the same goes for schools. However, what also happens, because these are issues which we are still trying to kind of mainstream, we are still trying to kind of force or to some extent kind of advocate towards integration of child protection within the education spectrum. I think it also comes up as a space where we're still trying to kind of, so while it becomes priority at one point of time, it also takes backseat at other point of time, depending on what else is the priority. I think what is happening in the education or with the state, I think while there is an understanding that this is an issue that needs to be looked at, I think in terms of prioritization, I think academics still kind of takes the upper hand. And as long as stakeholders, I think we prioritize both together and we understand the equal importance that a particular syllabus or academic portion has, and also the importance of socio-emotional learning, and both are equally important, I think then we will be able to better balance that prioritization, and it will not have to be an external body who will have to kind of, or external people who will continuously have to push it to say that, okay, this is also a priority.
So just to bring these things together then, what would you encourage the wider population in society to be doing in order to address these issues? What kind of conversations should they be striking with their family and friends around the taboos and stigmas that you've mentioned, whether it's mental health or whether it's child sexual abuse? Um, because clearly there are plenty of stakeholders here, and if we want to see the changes that you are talking about, many people need to play their part. So, what kind of thing would you encourage the average person to be doing?
I think to start with, if we can start conversations. I think conversation is the key. If we can start conversation with our children when they're very young, when we teach them names of body parts, we skip private body parts. We don't talk about them. Yeah. Just start with that basics. When the child is 3 years old, talk to them about private body parts, de-shame those private parts and say, okay, they are as much part of your body as any other part of your body. If we start this conversation with our children, if we follow kind of talking about safety planning and make it a part of a family norm with our not only with our children but other adults involved in childcare in the family. When we are striking conversation with schools, if we can get into conversations to talk about, does the school have a child protection policy? What is the school thinking about? Like when we are choosing schools today, we are not really looking at whether the school has a child protection policy, right? We are
Yeah.
looking at the school, whether there are ICC and IC toppers from that school coming out or not. That's one of our main criteria to kind of choose a school in, right? What is the average percentage of marks do they get in their board exam? Are we also looking at other processes that school follows? Does the school have spaces for doing life skill programs? Are the schools invested in social emotional learning? Are the schools something who believe that children are not only kind of here to do rote learning, but also kind of are they thinking about their teachers as more than mere kind of skill providers or knowledge experts? Are they also looking at that education is something where the teachers need to love and care and connect deeply and meaningfully to ignite the young minds, and also to create safe spaces where children feel that they can ask questions, they can seek help? So I think if those, I think as parents, as people in the society, if those are our expectations from the stakeholders like the school, the state, I think if we as society are being able to engage in this conversation, if we are being able to communicate in that language, I think, and if it becomes mainstream conversation, I think then only I think we'll be able to see this normative changes happening. Because I think norm change takes a lot of time. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens at a lot of levels, and the issues that we're thinking about addressing are very rooted, have deep roots in patriarchy, in other social constructs of gender, of sexuality. And so to kind of turn them around and to kind of deconstruct those status quos, I think it will need a lot of people to play their part and act on it. Yeah, it can't be one organization or a few organizations, or not even the state or the schools independently. It have to be an effort where everybody plays their part.
This educational future, which is open to these kinds of a conversation, do you think that would fundamentally change society in terms of the civic culture that's in that society? What would that look and feel like to you if these things actually happened, if these were the conversations? What kind of a society would we see before us?
I think if these are conversations that are happening, if we are being able to kind of have these conversations with our young learners and
Mm.
create that space for them, I think we will really play that role to kind of help them grow up to be citizens of tomorrow, who are kind of operating from a space of empathy, respect, care, for whom gender discriminations or breaking of personal boundaries are not acceptable ways to communicate in any relationship. For whom I think respect comes very core, empathy comes very core, and those are something that they know how to like they have those life skills to manage relationships, to make correct and safe choices for themselves and people around them. I think also we will then be able to kind of create that band of people and young people are then also being able to vocalize and talk about these issues. They will have lesser inhibitions to have these issues, as we call our children as person safety champions. So they will become the champions who will become the voice, and then it will not be voices of a few limited people, but voices of millions of children who will speak this language and speak this language and will help to then build communities and societies which are safe and just, and also will be able to have the confidence and courage to kind of tackle social problems and break status quo.